So for those of you who were here last week, I want to clarify something and maybe backtrack a little on something I said. Because I said last week, and I still believe that as we talk about spiritual awakening, and I talked about last week how I think it's so important and how I focus so much on this idea of spiritual awakening to the truth of us. And I do think that's incredibly important, and it is a intention, and it's a high intention for me to awaken to the truth of God, the expression of God within me, that expression of God that I am. And I'm also aware of how important it is to embody that spiritual awakening and to live that spiritual awakening in the world. That unless we live it, unless we demonstrate it, then how do we even know that we had it, right? How do we know we're awakened if we're not living it, if we're not expressing it, if we're not embodying it? So I want to just to explain a little bit about that and to say that I didn't mean to suggest that that's not also important, because I believe that too is important for us to embody that ideal. And I think that as I'm talking about the 12 steps in this short series, that I believe the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, or the 12 steps that are now used for many recovery programs, are a way for us to put some feet to our prayers. You know, you've heard that pray with your feet moving, or in James it says, faith without works is dead. And so I think that, again, it's like our 12 steps give us some practical tools to pray with our feet moving and put some work to our faith, to demonstrate it. And what I want to say to you, I'm not suggesting that everybody in this room has an issue with alcohol or drugs or any other addictive behaviors. I'm not making that assumption. Only you know that. But what I am saying is that I believe the 12 steps, as they are presented to us, do give us some practical ways to encourage our spiritual awakening and to help us to live that in the world, connecting with God, connecting with ourselves, and connecting with each other. Really are foundational principles of the 12 steps. And how do we do that? So last week I talked about the first 3 steps, which is about admitting that we're powerless, coming to believe that there is a higher power that can restore us to sanity, and making a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand God. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the 4th and 5th steps. But what I was reminded of this week as I was doing some reading again on the 12 steps is that one line from the 3rd step prayer. And that one line that I really love so much, it says, "Relieve me from bondage to myself." The prayer is to relieve me from bondage to myself, to my own way of thinking, to my own best efforts, to my own way of being in the world. Because sometimes that gets me to a place that I really don't necessarily enjoy, that I'm not living my truth, when I'm relying on what I've learned, who I've learned to be, how I've learned to be, what I've learned to believe, what all the things in my life have taught me, does not necessarily mean that that is the truth. And yet I focus on that aspect. I focus on who I think I am, who somebody has said I am, who I have believed myself to be. And then that thinking sometimes does not serve my highest good or the highest good of the people in my life. And so part of that 3rd step is to relieve me from that. Relieve me from bondage to that. Help me to know the freedom of living my truth, the truth of who I truly am. And again, this path, it's a path of recovery, of spiritual recovery. And it's a program that we can engage in that helps us to live that truth. So I want to just go back to that a little bit in that third step prayer of help me to be delivered, to free me from the bondage to myself. Emily Cady in Lessons in Truth talks about that. It's really the first chapter in the book. Bondage or liberty, which? Which you're going to choose? To be in bondage to that idea of self, or are you going to choose to be free? To liberate yourself? And so that's what I'm encouraging us to do. And not to just hear about this path. Not to just, oh, well, that's nice. And some of you may do that. But I'm encouraging you to really put these steps into practice. To look at your own life. And to use these steps to transform your life in a very meaningful way. So as I thought about the first 3 steps, I thought about that idea of really surrendering to God as I understand God. To really, what does that mean? How do I live that? How does that look in my life? And I was reminded of the scripture from Matthew where Jesus is talking to the Sadducees and the Pharisees. And the Pharisees were a sect in the Jewish tradition that really adhered strictly to the law. And they were trying to trip Jesus up, and they were saying to Jesus, well, so what is the greatest commandment? Oh, wise one. And you know what Jesus said, right? Jesus said to love God with all your heart and all your soul, your spirit, and your mind. That is the first commandment. And the second is like unto it. What is that? To love your neighbor as yourself. To love your neighbor as yourself. And I think really surrendering to God, to the God of our being, is what Jesus was saying when he said, love God with all your heart, all your mind, all your spirit. To love God. What does that mean, to love God? We also have in the scripture where it says God is love, right? So if God is love, love is God. What does that mean for us? And I think what it means for me is to let that awareness of love, God is love, to allow the awareness of love, the energy of love to fill my mind and to fill my heart and to be grounded in that space of love. With all your heart, all your soul, all your spirit, all your mind being focused on love. God is love. An awakening to the power of love. Yeah? To love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your spirit, all your mind. And then, that's the first commandment. But then Jesus said, put some feet to that. Put some work to that. Do something with that. Love your neighbor. Love yourself. What could he have meant by that? Love yourself. I thought about that this week. What would Jesus mean, love yourself? If I'm created in the image likeness, as the image likeness of God, then aren't I loved too? Doesn't that make me love as well? I'm the image likeness of God, so I'm created in the image and likeness of love. So if Jesus said, love yourself, I'm already love. How do I do that? Well, I think what Jesus was acknowledging is that there is that aspect of us that I was talking about earlier. That is the self that we have created or we have taken on or we have believed ourselves to be. Again, Emily Cady in Lessons in Truth makes the distinction between the individuation of God. Our individuality is that aspect of ourselves that is an expression of God, and our personality self, which is us living in our humanity, how we show up in the world, and all these ideas of ourself that we've kind of taken on and who we believe ourselves to be. And so I think that I had this image of, we live in two worlds, don't we? We really do live with our foot in two worlds. In the Spirit, in knowing who we truly are, and in this world, this life experience, our humanity. And what I was saying earlier is about our awakening to that truth is so important. But what is equally important, I believe, is allowing that awakening, this foot grounded in our knowing, loving God with all our heart and soul and mind and spirit, to allow that to then influence this aspect of us, so that the love that we are, the love that God is in and through us, we awaken to it and we express it in our humanity. And so we allow that space of flowing, And this aspect of us that sometimes doesn't always act out of love. Doesn't always act in a way that would say that we're grounded in love. And I think that's what Jesus was saying. Love even that. Love even that. How does love show up for us? How do you demonstrate love? Anybody? Give me some words that demonstrate love to you. Service. Smiles, compassion, kindness, respect, honoring, listening deeply, connecting with people. We don't always act in ways that reflect love. Sometimes we're like, over here, and we know that this is always our truth, and we're over here trying to live this life, and there's tension in that sometimes, isn't there? There's sometimes some discomfort in that space of that place, and I think that I really do have this idea that that's where our addictions are born, in that place of discomfort, in the pain, the struggle, of knowing that I am this love, I am an expression of God, and living in this place of humanity. And sometimes there's pain in that. There's tension in that. And we try lots of things to try to ease that tension, that pain. Maybe drugs, maybe alcohol, maybe sex, maybe shopping, all sorts of ways, food, to try to ease the pain a little bit. That's why sometimes I think that addicts are probably some of the most spiritual people I know. Because at some level, you know that truth and feel the tension so powerfully that I'm not living my truth. And there's that tension in that space. I'm going to take this off before I throw it on someone. And so how do we bridge that gap? How do we make that work for us? And I think that the fourth step is about taking a searching and fearless moral inventory. Why would anybody want to do that? Really? Why would we want to do that? Why would I want to look at all the ways that I have failed to live my divine self? And I think that's what I'm talking about. It's not about saying we're bad or awful people. It's not about enforcing the guilt and the shame. It is about honest self-connection honest self-connection that says, yes, I was acting in ways that were not most loving. What was I doing? What was I saying? How was I behaving that was not respectful of someone else? What was I doing or saying or being in the world that was not compassionate? What was I doing or saying and being in the world that was not honoring or connecting with another person? How did I fail to live the highest degree of love that I can possibly live? And the fifth step is about admitting that to ourselves, owning it, taking responsibility. But what I want to say about that is not from a place of beating ourselves with it. Not about saying you're an awful person because you did that, but to hold ourselves in that space of love. As Jesus said, love yourself. Love yourself, even when you recognize that you've done something that was not in alignment with your highest intention. And so that's really what I see that fourth step about, is owning that, admitting that to ourselves, looking back at our lives, looking back at yesterday even, and saying, wow, I wasn't fully grounded in my love in that moment. And then owning that for ourselves. The fifth step is also about admitting to God, admitting to ourselves, and admitting to at least one other person the exact nature of our shortcomings, where we fall short. Admitting to ourselves really is about, yeah, I did it. I did that. I said that. I acted in that way. That was not loving. Owning that, again, without shaming ourselves. And then to admit to God. You know, this was one that, especially in New Thought, I think, well, what does that mean? How do I admit to God? If God is everything and everywhere, if God is the universal life that is all around us, in which we live and move and have being, doesn't God already know what I did? Doesn't God already know that I fell short? Why do I need to admit it to God? What came to me about that, what I feel about that now in my journey, is that it's a place of really being in that place of, yes, in my humanity. This is what I did. I don't feel good about it. I'm not happy about it. I can mourn it. I can really feel the pain that I feel having admitted it to myself. And then to be able to just to admit to God, to me, is a way of experiencing some release. Because God is love, right? If God is love, being able to let go. Because I'm holding that energy of my guilt, my shame, my pain. To be able to say, hold me. God, source, life, divine love, unconditional love of God is still in light of all of that. All of that is still holding me in my truth. And then to admit it to another person. And what I want to say about that is that in 12 steps, that's usually your sponsor, somebody you trust, somebody you believe is willing and able to extend that love to you. In Catholic Church, it's about the priest, and the priest is supposed to be that. Doesn't always happen, but the priest is supposed to be that, right? So what I want to say about that is how important that is for us. Because what that is about for me, again, is being willing to tell another person where you have fallen short. And to allow another person to be the presence of God for you in that space. To hold you in that love, no matter what. You know, in the early Christian tradition, they did communal confession, where somebody did something that was outside of the space of love and respect and honoring for the community, and they owned that to the community. And the community then held them in that space of love. And how powerful and healing it is to sit with another person who is willing and able to extend that level of respect and love to you is powerful. Healing, cleansing. And so, again, as we look at these steps, and we'll talk next week and the week after about what it means to then extend that love to another person, to really extend that love to your neighbor and connecting with that and making amends and those kinds of things. But what I want to say there too is, are we willing? Are you willing to be honest with yourself and to admit to yourself where you are not acting in alignment with who you truly are, which is divine love, for yourself and for other people? Loving yourself is about showing compassion and love and honoring and connection with yourself first, really. Not beating yourself up. Not damning yourself to hell because you failed in some way to live your highest value. Are you willing to do that? And are we willing to hold another person in that space? Are we able and willing to hold another person, to be the presence of God as love, holding each other in that space, understanding and knowing that sometimes we all do things, say things, act in ways that are not in alignment with our highest value, our highest intention. And so again, just to recap a little, it's the idea that how important I believe it is for us to be grounded in love, in body, mind, and spirit, to love God with everything that we are, to be love with everything that we are. And to be grounded in that even before we start taking that searching and fearless moral inventory. And what comes to me about that is another word is fearless, not fear-free. Because we may have some resistance. To really be willing to love God and love ourselves. And to be present for ourselves. Deep self-connection and honesty. Accountability and responsibility. For where we have fallen short of loving. And it is in through all of that that we do free ourselves. We do free ourselves from the bondage of self.